The armed forces of the Terran Confederation have, in recent years, emerged as the ascendant power among military organizations in the cosmic assembly. In times of peace, a completely volunteer force, although it has a history of implementing conscription during major wars, including the ongoing Federation-Empire conflict. Given the human race's reputation as excellent engineers, one might anticipate their military to concentrate on very large, complex pieces of equipment. Surprisingly, humans took the opposite approach, emphasizing reliability and ease of use, favoring the simple and effective over the bloated and over-engineered. In essence, humans are boring but practical. This design philosophy contributed significantly to the speed at which they could mobilize their military, even while a substantial portion of their territory was under enemy control. In human society, military and civilian spheres are essentially distinct. No individual is legally obligated to serve as a soldier or sailor, and civilian leadership only engages with the military chain of command at the grand strategy level. An individual's social status or wealth, in principle, has no bearing on their rank. In theory, any man or woman can enlist as a seaman, private or aviator, and, by demonstrating exceptional skill or capability, advance to the position of Supreme Marshal of the Armed Forces. Beyond prestige and increased pay, a higher rank does not translate to additional property, such as land ownership. The Terran Confederation fleets comprise three services: the Confederation Armada, which oversees the Alliance Military Space Force and serves as the primary method of force projection; the Confederation Ground Forces, which constitutes the human ground forces, responsible for holding territory on planets; and the Confederation Aero Division, acting as a bridge between the fleets and the Army, operating from carriers in space and supporting the Army to establish dominance over hostile land, as well as leading the fleet's Air Force, which focuses on space-to-space combat. The fleets is undeniably the senior service, with the Army and Air Forces appearing to some as mere detachments, but all three are heavily interdependent. Without the fleets, the Army and Air Forces couldn't reach the battlefield or benefit from orbital superiority. Without the Air Forces, the fleets would be susceptible to enemy fighters, and the Army couldn't achieve air superiority. Without the Army, neither the fleets nor the Air Forces would have a means to secure ground, thus limiting their offensive capability. This identical philosophy that promotes gear that will function, regardless of circumstances, also applies to the human officer corps. Humans approach leadership with great importance, employing phrases like military science and operational art when discussing doctrine. The branches: High Command, High Com. Senior officers from all branches below, and civilian leaders, including the Prime Minister, convene in this most senior headquarters, devoted to maintaining the required level of force during peacetime and establishing long-term grand strategic objectives in wartime. The manner in which the military serves the population and what resources it needs to fulfill those requirements is determined here. The Confederation Armada, the spacecraft of the human military, ranging from corvettes to carriers. Its naming conventions draw heavily from the seafaring navies of humanity's history. There are presently 8 fleets in operation: First Fleet, Second Fleet, and so on, though sometimes adopting names based on their station system. Thus, Third Fleet is more commonly referred to as Sol Fleet, with a few working in tandem, theoretically able to overwhelm the defenses of one of an adversary's core worlds. As the primary means of force projection, it has 4 key objectives. Maintain dominance over the cosmic military of any foe of the Terran Confederation. Defend human space from would-be invaders. Defend the trade fleet from any and all potential threats. Transport, safeguard, and offer support to, and receive aid from, the Confederation Ground Forces and Confederation Aero Division. The fleet's infantry, responsible for boarding enemy ships, securing space stations, and defending their own vessel from hostile boarding parties. Though small in number, they often take charge when confronting pirates. The trade fleet, the foundation of the entire military. With 94% of all human shipping registered to it, the trade fleet is capable of, quite literally, transporting mountains. During peacetime, it maintains commerce, both in the human interior and in the broader galaxy, but in wartime can be recalled and have its resources placed at the disposal of High Command. It provides logistics for the military and transports materials and supplies for the War Ministry. It even has a division in Air Command, delivering supplies to isolated pockets of human ground forces. Although not a single vessel in the trade fleet is armed, one cannot underestimate their significance to human military might. Orbital Defense. A defensive organization consisting of older and/or smaller vessels, tasked with safeguarding the space surrounding a human world, at least until a primary fleet can arrive in the area of conflict. Also oversees orbital guns, utilized to enhance their combat capabilities. During peacetime, functions as a law enforcement body for merchant shipping, offering support to legitimate vessels and pursuing pirates and raiders. Due to this role, they possess unexpectedly high proficiency in counter-terrorist operations. The Confederation ground forces, the soldiers, tanks, trucks, armored vehicles, and artillery that assault terrorist strongholds and seize planets. The Army is the primary land force at the disposal of humans, boasting tens of millions of troops and hundreds of thousands of vehicles, ranging from scout cars to tanks. It's the most demanding in terms of personnel, involving 70% of the manpower available to the human military. Among all human military achievements, their ground combat capabilities stand out the most. They permanently etch their name in galactic military history following the rapid execution of Operation Trident, the coordinated invasion of 5 core worlds belonging to the Kraken Imperium. The Dropship Corps, the initial humans to land on an enemy world. In the period between the fleets securing orbital dominance over a planet and the Army taking control of the surface, the airborne must create a foothold on the planet for the regular Army to utilize. Gear and training centered on orbit-to-surface transit aids them in this task, highly risky as they typically have no means of withdrawal if an assault fails. Originally comprised entirely of infantry, but became the first in the Council to mechanize, just in time for the conflict. The Planetary Defense Militia, more commonly referred to as the Home Shield, this civilian reserve force committed to safeguarding planets and major space stations from raiders during peacetime, is expanded in wartime, accepting local volunteers to assist in garrisoning home territory and to enhance security by supporting the regular military, primarily composed of humans unable to meet draft requirements, either due to age or minor injuries. Utilizes Army surplus and previous generation equipment. This is logical, considering many Home Shield members are veterans familiar with the same gear from their former service. While not as proficient as the regulars, they prove effective against raiders, free up soldiers for campaigns on other worlds, and offer a crucial morale boost for civilians eager to contribute to the cause. Air Command fulfills a dual role for the military, offering support to the Army on the ground, Assault Command, and managing the carrier air groups of the fleets in ship-to-ship combat, Void Fighter Corps. The FAF operates from carriers that accompany the main fleet, while Assault Command functions from larger supercarriers that arrive once orbital superiority has been secured. The Dropship Corps is a collaboration between Assault Command and the regular Army, with Strike providing the transports and escort, while the Army supplies the soldiers and ground equipment. CS9, Covert Services. 9 stands as the premier organization for human espionage, aiming to safeguard human space from intruders and gather intelligence about the enemy, weakening them before conflict even begins. Agents must be ready to perform tasks ranging from eliminating a target to seducing them. Considering the challenges a human faces in blending in on an alien world, it's more probable they engage in the former rather than the latter. Additionally, CS9 oversees the SRU Human Special Forces, trained in ground, air, and space combat. SRU teams serve as the heavy hand of CS9, conducting raids on enemy camps, offering reconnaissance for upcoming attacks, and spearheading counterterrorism efforts. Even less information is available about them than CS9, and it appears HICOM intends to maintain this secrecy. This hasn't prevented conspiracy theorists from speculating about unlawful soldier enhancements or mind-controlling flesh-devouring worms. Part 2. How we fight. How we fight. Before we can even examine the equipment humans utilize, we need to comprehend the human approach to warfare. as the human methodology may in some aspects seem quite peculiar, and this shapes the priorities established for the equipment and training employed. It should be noted initially that humans take a scientific approach to warfare. Every action or statement made by a commander is classified and comprehended by those under, alongside, and above him. An armored squadron consistently maintains a specific strength and function within the broader conflict, and any lieutenant colonel trained in its leadership could theoretically be assigned command of any armored regiment in the Confederation ground forces. This aids all parties in grasping any situation involving the regiment, whether it is meeting its objective, sustaining heavy or light casualties, and so forth. This proves crucial as communication is vitally important to human success, as we may observe later on. Military science and military art are interconnected and rely on each other, yet possess notable distinctions. Military science encompasses all aspects of preparing and utilizing the military, such as training, organization, logistics, and even geography. Military art involves the actual practice of combat, the movement of units across terrain, determining why, where, and how to launch attacks, defining operations and their success criteria, and numerous other considerations. Military art itself is split into three levels. Strategy interprets the broad objectives set by the grand strategists of high command and converts them into aims for the conflict, carried out by senior generals at the scale of theaters, fleets, and army groups, potentially involving the whole military or substantial portions of it. Operations converts the objectives set by strategists into practically attainable yet impactful sequences of actions for the relevant military units to execute, carried out by general officers at levels ranging from corps to army groups, typically involving hundreds of thousands to millions of troops. Tactics implements the sequence of actions specified by operational commanders and interprets them into the necessary steps to overcome the enemy in combat and achieve the overall operational goal. Executed by junior officers at the divisional level at most, encompassing thousands or tens of thousands of troops. The general connections between strategy, operations, and tactics can be illustrated by a straightforward quote. Tactics create the steps from which operational leaps are built. Strategy indicates the direction. Humanity waves the rules and rules worlds. Space doctrine. The Confederation Armada views economics and politics as forms of warfare, much like grand battles between massive fleets of warships. During interspecies gatherings, it's typical for admirals to join the usual group of diplomats and negotiators, even when the meeting's purpose seems to have little or no military significance. To establish effective strategic objectives, great importance is placed on the economic standing of all relevant species, allies, and potential adversaries alike, from each planet's industrial capacity to the trade flowing between these worlds. To humans, the fleets serve as an instrument for securing their galactic position and undermining opponents wherever possible. Emphasis is placed on safeguarding communication and supply lines. While this might appear to spread the fleet's strength across numerous tasks, it actually achieves the opposite. Sufficient protection of the fleet's logistical foundation from enemy strikes allows for remarkable mobility across the theater, enabling them to concentrate force where needed, such as in a fleet engagement. With the fleets having reached the limit of their swift expansion to address the challenges posed by the Federation-Empire conflict, a frequent demand from humans is a generally expanded role in council military operations, enabled by measures such as the authority to step in during minor race skirmishes, or the establishment of bases across galactic space. This has resulted in a, for some, concerningly rapid increase in hard power, with humans gaining an ever greater voice in matters not directly affecting them, and the capability to bring certain non-human factions under their protection. Regarding tactics, humanity was greatly shaped by its naval history. The space fighter and fighter bomber serve as the main armaments in any fleet's arsenal. Battleships also play a role in fleets and offer a means of supporting ground operations, but carriers are the true focus. This all ties into the connections between military and industrial spheres. A few hundred fighters are equivalent in cost of materials and personnel to a cruiser, Yet they present the enemy with hundreds of targets instead of just one, reduce casualties, 50 destroyed fighters are preferable to a single destroyed cruiser manned by hundreds, are easier to upgrade or outright replace, and can be mass-produced more readily, enhancing the capacity to swiftly replenish losses and sustain combat effectiveness. A recent innovation in doctrine was the concept of long battle. Typical naval engagements last a few hours at most, as that is the maximum duration ships can fight before generating too much heat to continue. To do so would be fatal for the crew. However, a new approach is to extend the battle over several days by splitting one's own fleet and allowing one segment to conduct hit-and-run attacks, while the other segments remained out of combat and cooled, wearing down the enemy to ineffectiveness, followed by delivering a decisive knockout blow, committing all ships towards disabling or destroying as many vessels as possible before the enemy could retaliate or withdraw. Terra firma, land doctrine. Very few species can claim galaxy-wide unity since ancient times. All others have faced internal conflicts before encountering another sentient race. What truly varies is the extent of their suffering before finally uniting. Humans had only come together under a single banner within one generation prior to first contact, with only the Dracus having maintained internal strife longer than humans had. The final centuries before first contact witnessed the emergence of industrial warfare on Earth, global conflicts utilizing rudimentary yet comparable analogs to modern equipment. This peculiarity of galactic military history, resources devoted to warfare similar to today's, confined to the land, oceans, and atmosphere of a single planet, resulted in unimaginable bloodshed across every possible climate from sweltering jungle to icy tundra. Although the bloodshed of this period in human history is a source of embarrassment for the Alliance, it did have a beneficial aspect. For a greater duration than any other force, humanity acquired expertise in ground combat using contemporary weaponry. This factor, perhaps more than any other, played a crucial role in the triumph of Operation Trident. It should first be noted that the Confederation ground forces possesses immense resources at its disposal. However, for an enemy commander to assume the humans would rely on a conventional frontal assault to advance their position would be akin to suicide. Many accuse the humans of being blood-shy or afraid to take casualties. This is not accurate. If a critical objective can only be achieved through significant sacrifice of ground troops, then it will be done. It is simply more a case of humans favoring smarter, more precise applications of firepower to accomplish the same goals, but with less time and fewer casualties incurred. This approach is referred to in shorthand as maneuver warfare. The two most prevalent derivatives of maneuver warfare are blitzkrieg and deep battle. Blitzkrieg, a strategy employed to breach an enemy's defensive line, ideally resulting in the defeat or capture of substantial enemy forces. Blitzkrieg relies on the flexibility of the infantry armor-air support combination. The offensive begins with a spearhead, a mix of heavily concentrated tank formations and air-to-ground attacks, targeting weak spots in the defensive line. The aim is to penetrate the line and start to envelop or encircle the enemy positions. Infantry, transported by trucks and armored vehicles, would follow, securing territory and eliminating remaining resistance. Artillery would also be deployed, striking hard targets like fortifications from a distance. The primary objective is to eliminate the enemy's capacity to fight, compelling them to surrender, allowing the friendly forces to advance, maintaining the momentum. Deep battle, the more ambitious relative of blitzkrieg, employed when the enemy showed no clear vulnerabilities, but the humans possessed vast reserves. This doctrine represents the pinnacle of human land warfare. Deep battle utilizes one or multiple spearheads to penetrate the enemy line, similar to blitzkrieg. However, unlike blitzkrieg, the minimum number of troops is assigned to the spearheads, just enough to ensure swift success, with the remainder held back in reserve, referred to here as the main force. The spearheads expand, creating channels for the main force to surge through, maximizing the amount of firepower able to reach the enemy's rear. Neutralization of the enemy at the front is accomplished by eliminating his support, supply depots, headquarters, artillery positions, air bases, centers of infrastructure such as towns and villages, and so forth. Without his support, the enemy's front disintegrates and is absorbed by the humans. Ideally, the main force doesn't encounter anything resembling an equal opponent until it reaches its final operational objective, which could be hundreds of kilometers behind the front. Remember, to a human, the preferred method of putting an enemy tank out of action is to compel the crew to abandon it due to lack of fuel. Human historians trace the origins of their land doctrine to the pair of global conflicts that engulfed humanity over a span of 31 Earth years. Known as the First and Second World Wars, these conflicts resulted in the loss of tens of millions of lives, with a total exceeding 80 million. This was the cost of attaining an unmatched position among the galactic great powers. Part 3. Land and Air Forces, Arsenal of Humanity. Human weapon and vehicle manufacturers aim for the ideal balance between performance, reliability, and ease of production. Humans view war in a different light compared to other races, always considering how the economy at home can support military actions. A current trend in human thinking is the importance placed on the ability to replenish losses and maintain unit strength. This involves accounting for losses in soldiers, equipment, supplies and vehicles, and whatever is necessary to keep the unit as a whole organized and combat-ready. This requires a concept the humans call industrial capacity, the ability of the economy, or the home front, as it's often termed, to produce what is needed for waging war. The extensive industrialization of most human systems helps provide humans with a vast industrial capacity, but humans also increase capacity by finding ways to reduce the relative amount of capacity consumed by each piece of equipment produced. In basic terms, measures are implemented in the human war industry to simplify the production of all items. For instance, as we'll explore later, humans have developed a diverse range of vehicles for their ground forces, each with its specific function and appropriate variations, but all utilizing the same chassis and most components, even though each vehicle's performance could be enhanced with a unique design. The logic behind this is straightforward. A single design allows all factories involved in manufacturing and supplying that family to concentrate on producing one set of parts. This optimizes production and streamlines the supply chain. The old human adage, "Keep it simple, stupid," is fully embraced here, effectively foolproofing the military apparatus. This is undoubtedly less exciting than the doctrines of most other races, but it demonstrates effectiveness. The mobilization of the armed forces when war was declared exhibited a record rate of deployment. By the time the Dracus advance was stopped and gradually pushed back out of human territory, substantial reserves of manpower and munitions were ready for a counteroffensive. In combat, while the weapon systems of the Dracus kept malfunctioning, overheating, or simply exhausting their fuel or ammunition, the humans possessed weapons that functioned, continued to function, and functioned exceptionally well. Quantity has a quality all its own, and the vast numbers of advanced equipment the humans possessed enabled massive concentrations of firepower, swiftly overwhelming their opponents when delivering a decisive blow. Sailing through the Big Black, vessels of the Confederation Armada, a surprisingly large portion of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and human history contains numerous accounts of wooden or steel behemoths engaging in combat on the seas. This naval military tradition has led to a swift adaptation to space warfare. Main ships, the fleet carrier serves as the heart of each fleet, with one or more forming the nucleus of offensive capability. Housing hundreds of fighter or fighter bomber craft within its hangar, the carrier itself stays clear of combat and allows the now antiquated carrier air group to approach the target, typically a flagship. With escort vessels providing covering fire, creating a breach in the enemy's own escort, these HAGs constitute the primary human strike force in any engagement. For the past few decades, the Titan-class carriers were the principal cores of the fleets, but are now complemented by the Everest Prime class, a third larger with 50% more planes. The battleship concept is more prevalent in the broader galaxy, yet humans have once again adapted it to their own specifications. The most significant deviation from the standard design is the abandonment of the traditional three-spine gun's main armament, instead utilizing a single mass accelerator cannon spanning the ship's length. This is compensated for by emphasizing the maximization of the single cannon's final velocity and considering that a projectile's kinetic energy increases with the square velocity, plus the greater effective range for a faster projectile in space combat. This approach has proven quite advantageous for humans. Human battleships also incorporate numerous smaller guns designed to eliminate escort ships, along with an extensive laser array for countering enemy fighters. The smaller guns also assist in providing orbital fire when operating in a ground support capacity. Having focused on carrier construction during the war, the fleet is now opting to modernize the Churchill class. Heavy cruisers are fairly common among smaller nations constrained by treaty or budget, but humanity is the unusual great power to show them appreciation. Never having been restricted in cruiser construction by the Council, humans developed these poor man's flagships for garrison duty, freeing up larger vessels for offensives or for intercepting enemy strikes. You're more likely to encounter a heavy cruiser bearing the orbital defense ensign than that of the fleets. As humanity lends more and more resources to protectorates and mandates, plus the occupation of post-hierarchy space, these straightforward ships are quick to produce for capitals, and a slightly modified version of the Coral Sea class is a successful export to other species. Light cruisers serve as the quintessential escort in ship-to-ship combat. Acting as the shield to the sword of the capital ships, light cruisers soak up enemy fire and return volleys of their own to prevent enemy capitals from positioning themselves and targeting their spine guns at the human fleet. The cornerstone of both the fleets and orbital defense, these vessels must be effective, yet also incredibly inexpensive, which they are. During the conflict, a human shipyard in the New Bergen system managed to construct a Krakow-class light cruiser, from welding the initial shaped hull sections to installing the electrical systems in just 3 standard days, with it entering service 2 weeks later, setting a galactic record in military construction that previously stood at 2 months. While light cruisers protect the fleet from enemy vessels, destroyers specialize in anti-fighter warfare. The smallest and lightest ships in service, R-class destroyers, possess only 2 cannon compared to a Warsaw's 30, but feature an impressive laser grid to slice through fighters at close range. Destroyers thus create a wall of lasers that tends to cut swarms of enemy fighters to pieces before they reach their targets. These small ships should not be underestimated, being the bane of both pirates who wish to board the convoys they guard and conquerors who seek to overrun the planet they garrison. Space fighters, Blackburn Anvil. The only fighter-bomber humans utilize in space, this compact 2-person craft is too small to accommodate a cannon, instead depending on missiles for its bomber function, and 4 machine guns mounted in a rear turret for self-defense. The pilot controls the craft and launches missiles, while the co-pilot primarily manages the turret. It has a higher casualty rate than most service branches, but approaching within a kilometer of an enemy flagship and delivering an oversized antimatter-powered shotgun blast their way is some humans' notion of a career. Volkov Scythe, a single-pilot fighter tasked with guarding the fighter bombers. An unusually large core and 8 machine guns render this craft swifter, more agile, and better equipped than many others. Pilots, however, are provided with a higher dose of radiation tablets compared to most of their colleagues. Other supercarriers. While they don't engage in space combat, they are arguably the reason the fleets exist. Sacrificing armor and weaponry for an enormous hangar space, these behemoth-class behemoths transport the Confederation ground forces, assault command, and the dropship corps to their destinations. Each carrier must accommodate nearly 1 million tons of soldiers and equipment, and relies on 3 massive drive cores for propulsion. These vessels are highly vulnerable and are never left in a system without a main fleet for protection. Space shuttles, utilized to ferry equipment and crew between vessels. 2 variations of the standard longship class exist, depending on the affiliation of the destination ship. The Eric class, named after the renowned explorer, is the more basic version, a simple transport between 2 fleet ships. The Ragnar class, named for the relentless conqueror, is considerably more intriguing. The realm of the marine infantry, the MI employ these vessels to deploy boarding parties against enemy ships, essentially launching the Marines out of the craft while moving straight towards the objective. Though effective in human hands, the Ragnar class has struggled to find widespread adoption. Croesus ships, named after the wealthiest individual in human history, these vessels from the galaxy's biggest production line are the embodiment of the merchant marine. Discovering that most existing registered ships were undersized, outdated, or simply adhered to different standards than the human norm, High Command commissioned the design and production of a capable cargo vessel to increase total available tonnage and modernize the civilian trade economy in the process. The entire cargo hold is actually a series of enclosures for massive standardized containers, swiftly loaded or unloaded so the next vessel could dock and handle their own cargo. A hallmark of the human home front was steel arriving at the factory in the morning, the joined hull sections cooling during lunch, and the newly constructed ship being added to the register before the end of the shift, for the process to occur 2 more times over the full 24 hours. 20,000 Croesus now exist, having been gifted to the crews who operated them during the war. Expect to encounter them in large numbers at any trade hub. Hospital ships. While not officially part of the military but often collaborating with it, the White Crescent provides its services in treating the wounded and ill victims of any catastrophe in the galaxy, including conflict zones. To facilitate this, the fleets repurposed old carriers, upgrading the core structure and systems, and refitted them as faster-than-light hospitals, entrusting them to the White Crescent. These vessels frequently accompany the fleets, caring for injured civilians and soldiers, even those the fleets themselves are battling. People across the galaxy have come to view these ships and their crew as heroes and protectors of the vulnerable. It's unsurprising that even the council races are embracing the term humanitarian. With growing public support for a dedicated hospital ship design, the White Crescent anticipates continued expansion.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.